Welcome everyone. We are into week 5 of our MOOC, and this week we're focusing on meal planning, and Diana's given you a lot of good links to recipes, menu ideas, freezer cooking. So I hope you're enjoying the different links and resources you're being exposed to this week. And next week, which is our final week of the lesson, we're going to talk about decision making, dealing with stress and motivation. And so a lot of good things coming up. And next week, in addition to answering questions from this week's lesson, any questions that you might have about stress and motivation and handling the decision-making skills, you can include them, and we'll cover all those next week. So this week, we're primarily talking about foods. And the first question says, what foods influence inflammation? And I'm basing this on the research that has been done with individuals who have rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis, because both of those are constant states of inflammation. And depending on what level of inflammation you're experiencing, it obviously influences the pain and discomfort you have. And the individuals who had the lowest reported symptoms related to arthritic inflammation were those that were following closer to the Mediterranean diet, and in some studies, the vegan diet, where there were no animal products at all. But the main emphasis is a diet high in fruits and vegetables and fresh fruits and vegetables, because you're going to get a lot more antioxidants, which may play a role in inflammation. A diet high in whole grains. Nuts could be a part of that diet. And you want to limit certain foods, such as simple sugars. We do have some research that shows that simple sugars and processed foods might stimulate the inflammatory response. We have studies that show that saturated fats and trans fats can stimulate pathways, metabolic pathways that initiate the inflammatory process. So that's why this again fits with the Mediterranean diet, because the Mediterranean diet is lower in total fat and saturated fat because of the reduced emphasis on the meat products. Trans fats that I mentioned was actually part of the very first lesson that you had. Trans fats are primarily found in fast foods, fried foods, and processed foods, stick margarines. You also want to limit just the refined carbohydrates like white bread. Put the emphasis on whole grain instead of white rice. Not that you have to totally give it up, but put the emphasis on brown rice as an example. One of the things you actually want to emphasize to reduce inflammation is omega-3 fatty acids. They have an anti-inflammatory effect. And that's one of the reasons there is a promotion for omega-3 fatty acids for heart health, because reducing inflammation can also reduce your risk for heart disease issues. And omega-3 fatty acids are primarily found in fish. DHA and EPA, which again we talked about in the very first week's lessons, are the sources of omega-3 fatty acids that are the most heart healthy, and they become concentrated in fish tissue. Now, fish oils can also be a source of omega-3 fatty acids. If you happen to be on any blood thinners, you want to talk to your doctor before starting fish oil, because fish oil can also act as a blood thinner. So if you're already on a blood thinner, you don't want to start taking a large amount of fish oil without talking to your physician first. Now, some other sources of omega-3s that you can work into the diet: canola oil, walnuts, chia seeds, and flax seeds. However, because these are not fish sources, while they do have omega-3 fatty acids, our bodies are not very efficient at converting the source of omega-3s into EPA and DHA. We only convert about 15% of the omega-3 fatty acids from the sources, the canola oil, walnuts, chia seeds, and flax seeds. So it's still a source in the diet, but it's not a really high source like eating fish 2 to 3 times a week as recommended would be. There are a couple of spices, ginger and curry. Both of those have been shown to have anti-inflammatory effects in research studies. We had quite a few people ask questions about nuts. One person said, I like nuts, but I've limited them lately due to their fat content. So what are some good arguments for why I need to consider working nuts back in? Someone else asked what the best nut to eat is. We know that nuts are protective against heart disease and diabetes both. Now, once you have diabetes, the nuts are not going to improve your blood glucose levels. But population groups who ate nuts on a regular basis, and I'll define regular for you in a minute, had a lower onset or lower rate of diabetes. And we also know that when nuts, which are high in monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, replace saturated fats in the diet, we lower your risk for heart disease, and it's also can become easier to manage your lipid levels. Now, what is considered a serving or regular intake of nuts? A serving is 1 ounce of nuts, and that equals 1/4 cup of nuts. And the amount of times you should eat them is 5 times a week. That's what the research study shows, that individuals who ate approximately 1/4 cup of nuts 5 times a week were able to lower their disease risk. And in terms of calories, yes, they are high fat, but they're a good source of fat in the diet. And so they're heart healthy. And so, for that basis alone, I think we can justify working them in. They're a good source of non-animal protein for individuals who are restricting their animal intake. Walnuts are the only nuts that will give you some omega-3 fatty acids for the person wanting to know what's the best nut. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best nut because I think all nuts are valuable working into the diet. But if you're looking for more omega-3s, but remember only about 15% of it will actually convert. And in terms of fiber, almonds are a good source of soluble fiber in the diet, which is good for digestive health and heart health also. Another person asked about how does eating a lot of bananas affect the amount of potassium that I'm getting. Potassium is a mineral that's very important to our body's function. A lack of potassium in the diet can cause muscle weakness, irregular heartbeat, nausea, vomiting, and mood changes. So you do want to get adequate intakes of potassium. The USDA, the DRI guidelines state for adults that it should be 4,700 milligrams or 4.7 grams. So to give you an idea, a banana, if it's a medium banana, is giving you 450 milligrams of potassium. So one banana is giving you approximately 1/10 of the recommended intake based on the United States dietary recommended intake values. But we also get potassium from other sources. Some of the higher sources were acorn squash, potatoes, whether white potatoes or sweet potatoes, with the skin, because the skin is an excellent source of it, spinach, lentils, beans, watermelon, raisins, yogurt, and orange juice, and oranges. So if you're eating a well-balanced diet, you're probably going to get your recommended amount of potassium without difficulty. And the nuts that we mentioned earlier are also a decent source of potassium in the diet. Someone else asked, is there a good chart that shows foods and the nutrients that they provide? Because she wanted to create a resource she could look at. I did a search this morning and I couldn't find one chart that really covered all the food groups. There's a lot of individual charts. I will say, actually, I found one, but it wasn't from a source that I trusted. They were selling a product. So I never want to use those sources as reliable sources when they're out to make a profit. So it wasn't what I considered a reputable source. However, I did find that the FDA has 3 charts that looked really good that you could download. And one of them was on raw fruits, one of them was on raw vegetables, and one of them was on fish. And they did show you for fruits, vegetables, and fish what nutrients you would get from them and what their function is in your body. So with today's chat, I will post the link to that, and that gives you at least a few charts, but I couldn't find an all-comprehensive one. The next question said, what are some suggestions for high calcium foods? And Diana actually, on one of the discussion threads, when someone wanted to know what are some high calcium foods, had some good suggestions. But in case you didn't read that, the primary source of calcium in our diet is dairy products. Milk, we recommend 1%, 0.5%, or skim milk. It's only recommended that you drink 2% whole milk if you have children 2 years and younger, because they need the essential fatty acids from the higher fat products for the brain development. But everybody that's 2 and over should be with 1% or less. Also, fish with soft bones, such as sardines. Orange juice that has been fortified with calcium, and there's a lot of options for that. There's also fortified soy milk. Tofu, although the calcium content of tofu will vary depending on how it was processed. So you want to read the label and see how much calcium it's providing. Dark green leafy vegetables such as spinach, turnip, and collard greens. They're all very high sources of calcium if you don't want to take in the dairy products. Is taking a vitamin and mineral supplement helpful? So I'm going to kind of tie this back into the calcium. And we actually talked about this question last week, but since calcium came up, I'll mention it again. That if you don't use dairy products and you don't care for some of the foods I listed, then as I told you last week, I do think it's okay to take a vitamin and mineral supplement to cover some of the deficiencies in our diet. Now, when you take a vitamin and mineral supplement, calcium, which is a mineral, you're probably only going to get something that has about 20% of calcium, the 20% of the recommended intake. Because calcium is very bulky, and so when they put it in a vitamin and mineral supplement, they can't put it in very large amounts because it would be too big of a pill to swallow. But you can buy separate calcium supplements with vitamin D added in. So if you feel like you are unable to get the adequate amounts of calcium through your diet, which is always preferable, then yes, you might want to consider taking in a vitamin mineral supplement or calcium separate on its own. And as I mentioned last week, we can eat a well-balanced diet and not need any vitamin and mineral supplements, but most of us don't do that consistently on a day-to-day basis. We're usually deficient in some nutrient or another. Sometimes we just have poor appetites because we're sick. It can be due to seasonal changes, limited access to the foods, and things like that. There was a question about, does diet affect the menstrual cycle and the relationship to acne? And no, it does not. Acne is related to the onset of the menstrual cycle because there's a fluctuation in hormones, but how you're eating is not going to impact that at all. But weight is related to severity of acne. So eating a healthy diet and maintaining a body weight, a healthy body weight, or even losing weight will actually help control your acne breakouts. And which reminds me, I didn't mention this on the very first question about inflammation, but even though I talked about diet in terms of reducing inflammation, the best thing you can do is to lose the weight. There is a direct correlation that the heavier your body weight is, the more pressure you are putting on in inflamed joints, and you're going to have more discomfort. So relating back to that very first question, bringing down your body weight will make a significant impact on the amount of inflammation that you have. This next question was a good one because this has been a very popular food item. It was considered one of the trendy foods of 2013 and going on into 2014. What are my thoughts on chia seeds? And chia was actually best known for the chia pets, if you remember the advertisements for those. I want to say maybe in the 90s and the early 2000s. And chia pets sprouted grass-like fur when you watered them because the seeds will sprout very rapidly when they're watered. It is an edible seed. It's gotten a lot of attention because the idea is if you eat chia seeds and they swell in your stomach because they do swell when exposed to fluids, that it would help you lose weight because it would make you feel fuller. All the research studies found no relationship between weight loss and eating chia seeds. So for that purpose, it's not been shown effective. But chia seeds still have some very good advantages to them. 2 tablespoons of chia seeds contain about 140 calories and 11 grams of fiber. And that's a good source of fiber. Now, you will see them promoted as providing this really large amount of omega-3 fatty acids. But remember what I said, when it's the non-fish sources, our bodies only convert about 15% to EPA and DHA. So while, yes, chia seeds are a good source of fiber, don't count on them giving you all the omega-3s that they might be advertising, because your body just doesn't convert it efficiently. So how do you use chia seeds? You can sprinkle them on any food that you want. You can put them in cereals and yogurts and ice cream. There's a granola bar I like that contains chia seeds. A lot of people will mix them into their smoothies or even just juices in the morning. You can add them to baked goods like muffins and cookies and pancakes. There's a lot of things that you can do with them. In addition to being a great source of fiber, they also provide you some antioxidants. They will give you some calcium, and they will give you some protein. Okay, the question that I hadn't answered the week before, because I forgot to go back and look at it, that's what about using suet from grass-fed beef? And suet is raw beef fat. And when I did some research on it, the producers of it are saying that because it's grass-fed, it's higher in omega-3 fatty acids than cattle that are grain-fed. And I'm not doubting that. There probably is a higher amount of omega-3s, but you're never going to find a beef product that's high in omega-3s to begin with. So while it may be higher, beef is never going to be considered a good source of omega-3 fatty acids in the diet. So is it worth it to start using the grass-fed beef suet in order to get more omega-3s when it is so highly saturated fat? It is 70 to 80% of saturated fat. And we have many, many studies that show high intakes of saturated fat will raise your risk for heart disease. So personally, if you want to use it on an occasional basis, but I would not be pushing it thinking that I'm getting more omega-3 fatty acids, because I think the disadvantages outweigh any advantage of getting slightly more omega-3s. It is very popular, though, because it's a stable fat for frying. And people are making tallow out of it. A question I had gotten in an email said, how do you eyeball portions of food? Because as you know from your first lessons, we are encouraging you to weigh and measure your foods. But nobody wants to go into a restaurant and pull out their measuring cups, although I have seen people do it. But most of us, that's not something we want to mess with. So how can we tell what serving sizes we should be eating when we're eating away from home? I'm going to give you some links with today's lecture that will give you some visuals to look at, and what I'm getting ready to tell you is listed within that information. But here's some examples. A 3-ounce serving of meat would equal a deck of cards. A 3-ounce serving of fish would be like a checkbook cover. 1.5 ounces of cheese, 3 dominoes or 4 dice cubes. 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, which is the serving size, although for me 1 tablespoon of peanut butter is plenty. But 2 tablespoons of peanut butter would be like a ping pong ball or a golf ball. What do we count as 1 medium fruit? Think of a tennis ball, a baseball, or a light ball. What does 1 cup of cooked vegetables look like? Tennis ball or baseball. 1 medium potato is a computer mouse, the equivalent size. What does 1 cup of pasta look like? A tennis ball or a baseball again. So you can kind of keep that visual in your head. Most of us know what tennis balls and baseballs look like size-wise. And so many of the foods are using that as the reference. What does a tablespoon of butter or oil look like? Think of a poker chip. And as I mentioned, I believe I've got maybe 3 websites that I'm listing for you that will give you more information on being able to eyeball your portion sizes. Now, the last thing I want to mention was not asked specifically on the message board, but in this week's lessons, you're working with the nutrition facts label. actually last week's lesson. In the United States, we are going to be updating the nutrition facts label. It's currently open for comments, and I'm going to give you the website, the USDA website, where you can go read about the proposed changes for the nutrition facts label. And if you wanted to contribute comments, you could. The ones primarily who will contribute comments will be the scientists, persons like myself, registered dietitian, food manufacturing companies who are going to be strongly impacted by the nutrition labels. But the average consumer can contribute their comments, and all of these are taken into consideration. So what's going to be new on the nutrition label, the proposed nutrition label? They're going to require added sugars, which is good. We know that our intake of simple sugars can raise the inflammatory state. It obviously is going to contribute to excess calories with very little nutrients, so it's good to know that we need to be more aware of any added sugars. And also, when we eat items high in added sugars, we're probably getting less of the nutrient-rich foods. They're going to update the daily values for nutrients like sodium, dietary fiber, and vitamin D. And the daily values are used to calculate the percent daily value that's listed on a label. So if a product shows that for calcium, it's giving you the 10% of the daily value, that means it's giving you 100 milligrams of calcium, because the daily value is set at 1,000. And so this is going to help consumers understand the food product better in terms of their total daily diet. They're going to change some of the nutrients that are required to be listed. Currently, it's calcium, iron, vitamin A, and C. Vitamin A and C are now going to become voluntary by the manufacturers. The ones that will be required according to the proposed label will be potassium and vitamin D, because they are the two new nutrients of public health significance. We're finding out the majority of the population is deficient in vitamin D, and it's not unusual to see a lot of people not getting adequate intakes of vitamin K because, not vitamin K, potassium, because we don't consume the recommended amounts of fruits and vegetables. Calcium and iron will continue to be on. So the new 4 nutrients will be potassium, vitamin D, calcium, and iron. They will continue to require total fats, saturated, and trans fats on the label, but they're going to eliminate the calories from fat, because research shows that the type of fat is more important than the amount. And honestly, my clients never know what to do with the calories from fat. When it was listed, it just didn't have much application, so it really wasn't that usable. They're going to change the serving size requirements to reflect how people eat and drink today. This has been probably the most controversial change. An example is ice cream. A current serving of ice cream is 1/2 cup. What they're saying is nobody ever eats a 1/2 cup. The average consumer will eat 1 cup, and that's referred to as the RACC, the reference amounts customarily consumed, RACC. And for ice cream, it's 1 cup. So they're saying we need to tell them how many calories and grams of fat and added sugars they're getting from a cup of ice cream, because that's what they're eating. Sure, we'd like everyone to eat a 1/2 cup, but that's not happening. Another example is soda pops. Currently, a 20-ounce bottle of soda is considered more than 1 serving, because they count 12 ounces as a serving of soda. And they're saying with the new labels, a 20-ounce bottle of soda will be counted as 1 serving. So you're going to be given the nutrition information for the whole bottle, whereas previously you were given it for a portion of the bottle, and many consumers thought that was the whole bottle. They didn't realize they were drinking more than 1 portion according to the label. For certain packages that are larger and could be consumed in 1 sitting or multiple sittings, the manufacturers will have to provide a dual column that indicates per serving and per package. An example of this would be like a pint of ice cream. And even though this doesn't say ice cream, looks to me like it would be an ice cream label. And so they're showing you that per 1 cup, there's 220 calories. If you ate the whole pint of ice cream, it's 440 calories. And then they're going to show the calcium, the added sugars, the saturated fat. So this is going to be one of the things you'll see on the new labels, so that you understand if you're eating the entire pint, you're getting 440 calories. Because many people didn't realize that, well, according to the current labeling laws, a pint of ice cream had 4 servings. But again, people didn't eat just 1/4 of a pint of ice cream. They either ate half of it or all of it. And so the new labels are going to help you make those decisions. Okay, they're also going to make the calories and serving sizes more prominent to emphasize the parts of the label that will address our current public health concerns, such as obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. They're going to move the percent daily value to the left of the label so that you see it first. It tells you how many nutrients you're getting from a particular food, and we read from left to right. So that means we're going to be reading those percent daily values first. And they're also going to change the footnote to make it more clear. One of the concerns is because they're changing the daily values. I was at a meeting where someone from the peanut board said that they're considering the current daily value for peanuts is based on 25 grams of peanuts, which is a little under an ounce of nuts. And they pointed out that at the 25 grams, peanuts qualify as a good source of fiber. And I do promote nuts as a source of fiber to my clients. They are considering raising the daily value for fiber to 28 grams. And if they do that, peanuts will no longer be able to make the claim they're a good source of fiber. So there are some industries that are concerned about changing the daily values because they think their products are give important contributions to the diet and certain nutrients that they're no longer going to be able to promote them that way. So that's still going to be out there. So let me show you what they're talking about, the label looking like. And I know you can't really read the yellow, but I'm going to give you the link that you can go look at these labels themselves. But they're going to make the serving size much bigger. You can see there it says calories, 230, and it says 8 servings per container. So they're going to make that much more obvious. As I mentioned, the percent daily value is now going to be the first thing that you see on the left-hand side. Notice that under carbohydrates, you now have added sugars, which we want people to be aware of. And on the vitamin D, for example, instead of just giving you like 10% of the daily value, they're going to give you the actual number. When you look at this one, calcium is 20%, and then it says 260 milligrams. And so it's giving you the actual number and not just the percentage. An alternative format that they're looking at, I like for different reasons. Again, notice that the servings and the calories are much bigger. I like that they give you the quick facts, shows you total fat, total carbs, the added sugars are there. Avoid too much, and then it shows you the things we want people to be cautious of, how much they're contributing. And then to get more of are listed on there also. So I kind of like this format. I don't know how popular it is, but I like the fact that it's reminding people be cautious of foods that contribute higher amounts of these and try to consume more foods that give you the fiber, the vitamin D, the calcium, and things like that. So currently open for comments on the nutrition labeling laws, and within the next year or two, we're going to see some changes go into effect. Okay, we are at the end of today's session, and again, thank you for contributing your questions. I like to have the opportunity to do these chats for you and just create a little bit more of a personal connection, but also address specific issues of yours that we didn't cover in enough detail for you in the lessons. So any questions you have from this week's lessons, but also next week's lessons about emotion, stress, motivation, things like that, be sure and list them, because next week on Wednesday will be our final chat during week 6. Content of the MOOC will remain open for another month after next week ends, so that if you didn't quite get through all the lessons yet, you've still got time. And I hope you all have a great remainder of the week. Thank you.